Welcome everybody to this short teach-in video, which is part of a series of teach-in videos that you'll be able to get from our YouTube channel, Tenant Farmers YouTube channel, along with a host of other video material, including our webinar series. But these teach-ins are designed to highlight key points on issues of topical concern for tenant farmers, and they just give you a bit of an insight into things that you should be thinking about. And today we're going to be looking at an issue that we constantly talk to our members about, which is, do you know where your tenancy agreement is? In a moment, I'm going to be introducing you to one of our expert rural surveyors, Sarah Sumner, who's going to be taking us through that topic today. But I should say we are really grateful to Oxbury Bank for sponsoring this series of teaching videos and our wider webinar series through 2023. Oxbury were founded in 2021 by a group of farmers and bankers and technologists. They are the UK's only bank which is 100% dedicated to serving farmers, food producers, and the rural economy. So we are absolutely delighted to have them on board. So as I say, we're looking today at, do you know where your tenancy agreement is? And without further ado, I will introduce you to Sarah Sumner, who's one of our expert rural surveyors who will take us through that topic. Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, slightly strange question, but actually a really important one. Can we see a copy of your tenancy agreement? It's probably the #1 question that we ask of our members. So why is it so important? Firstly, it's a legally binding contract. A tenancy agreement is the binding agreement between two parties, the landlord and the tenant. And whilst a lot of them are seemingly quite standard with maybe standard template agreements used, especially with farm business tenancy agreements, each agreement is unique. It might have changed one word, might have changed a clause, may have changed a whole heap of things. So it's often really crucial for us to see tenancy agreements. Within the tenancy, there are a whole host of things about knowing your rights and responsibilities. So it might be, for example, that your repairs liabilities set out within the tenancy agreement, or pointing us off somewhere else. But until we see your agreement, we wouldn't know whether it's standard, not standard, or bespoke specifically for your holding. It's also really important so that you can understand what type of tenancy agreement that you hold, whether you hold a farm business tenancy, an Agricultural Holdings Act tenancy under the 1986 Act, or it might not even be a tenancy at all. So until we see the agreement, we can't be 100% sure. It's also really, really important for ascertaining rights such as succession rights, maybe the age of the tenancy, there may be mentions of succession within your agreement. You can also tell us what parties there are. It might be a joint tenancy that we weren't aware of, or it may be that there's been an assignment. So for a whole heap of reasons, it's really, really important for us to see your tenancy agreement. And the next slide, please. Okay, so what happens if you don't have a written agreement? Then there are situations, and it's more common than you think, where there isn't a written agreement. Maybe you've always had a verbal agreement. Maybe that the tenancy agreement's ceased, but you're actually still occupying. Maybe that agreements haven't been quite finalised and you're actually already in occupation, or some tenancies, especially maybe in succession situations, they might rely on tenancy agreements of your predecessors. So what happens in these situations? Well, it's very bespoke. Basically, we need to know exactly what situation you're in, and it can often come down to other advice, evidence and bits and pieces that we might need to see or know or understand to see exactly how you are occupying. But it's perfectly possible for you to have a verbal agreement.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. That's a great introduction to that issue. And as you say, it's one of those questions that we routinely ask members when they want some advice about a topic. We say, "Where is your tenancy agreement?" But as you've said in your presentation, very often when we get asked to provide advice about whether a tenancy agreement in a written form exists at all when someone has been occupying land on a verbal basis without a written agreement, what evidence would be useful in assisting in reaching an answer to that question as to whether a tenancy agreement exists? And how would you determine under which code any tenancy agreement existed if one did exist?
Okay, so we'd really be looking for as much history as you could give us, chronological history if possible. So when did you start occupying? How have you occupied? Have you occupied continuously all year round? Has anyone else had any occupation of the land? So have you been in exclusive occupation? Dates are really crucial when it comes to tenancy. So any paperwork you've got, any letters that might have passed between parties, anything that looks like it might be a legal document, even if it's just a piece of paper with a couple of signatures on it. Have you been paying rent or something akin to rent, maybe a different type of benefit? What evidence have you got of that? So monthly rental payments or annual rental payments are a really good form of evidence, even if it's just a copy of your checkbook stub. So the other thing we often look for is where there's a clear intention from both parties to be letting the holding. So like I said, anything you've got really from the landowner, the landlord, to indicate that they're happy with you being there is really, really helpful. In understanding what type of tenancy you have is down to dates. So if you've been occupying since prior to the 1st of September 1995, it's more likely you've got a more secure 1986 Agricultural Holdings Act tenancy. And after the 1st of September 1995, it would be a farm business tenancy. So those dates are really crucial. The other date that is also one that's really, really important is whether you've been occupying since before the 12th of July 1984, which might mean that your tenancy has succession rights. It might be multi-generational potentially. So dates are crucial, and the more anything that you can provide to show those dates is really helpful.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And sometimes when you have an oral tenancy, there's often talk about your ability to assign that tenancy into a limited company, which will mean that the tenancy will continue perpetually for as long as the limited company is trading and remains solvent. So what's the benefit of that? And are there any circumstances where we wouldn't recommend someone taking that step to assign to a limited company?
Okay, so that really is the main benefit. So rather than a tenancy being sat with the individual and potentially dying with the individual, if it can be assigned into a limited company, that tenancy may potentially be able to live forever as it's vested within the company rather than the individual. So if it's a verbal tenancy, the bar to assign is usually a written term within a written tenancy. So if it's verbal, by essence, there is no bar in assigning it. So as long as you haven't had in any time a Section 6 notice served upon you demanding a tenancy in written terms, there won't be a bar on assignment. So you could go and assign that tenancy. There are drawbacks, which is just something to bear in mind, I suppose. It's firstly, it will cause, or it will likely to be cause bad feeling with your landlord. You've just basically sold given a tenancy for forever on their holding. So if you have a good relationship and you don't want to harm that relationship, that would potentially be a reason that would stop you from assigning it. It may be something that you could use as a bargaining chip. If you have assigned it, you may be able to use it to negotiate a different term, or what have you, or a surrender, or what have you. So that's one big drawback. And the other is that if your tenancy was actually found to be in place, but merely lost by the tenant, so if the landlord could find a copy of that tenancy agreement and you have been and assigned it, then potentially you could have caused an irremediable breach of your tenancy under case, and which could lead to a KC notice to quit. So it can have a serious consequence. So I think the main thing to say is you would take advice before you do anything. You must take advice from either us at the TFA, and then potentially in terms of assigning a lease, we would then suggest you speak to a solicitor to carry out that assignment as well.
Okay, Sarah, that's really helpful. Thanks for that. I think we'll leave it there for now. And obviously, members who find themselves in a position of either having lost their agreement or maybe thinking they've never had an agreement in the first place, so any tenant farmers in that position can contact the TFA for specific advice, information and support about that. And it's relatively inexpensive to join the TFA. It's only £249 a year at the moment, and that gives you access to expert advisors like Sarah, who can help you through those issues. So thanks very much, Sarah, for that. I should say that we are recording this at the beginning of 2023, so anything we say is current at that point. If you need further information or advice, do contact the TFA for further information. So hope you enjoyed our brief teaching on this important topic. As I say, it's part of a wider library of video information that you can get on our YouTube channel, both these teachings and some of our wider webinars. Thanks again to Oxbury for their generous sponsorship of this series of teachings and our webinars throughout 2023. And we've got a couple of important webinars coming up. If you are watching this at the beginning of 2023, we've got the Program Director for Future Farming, Janet Hughes, coming back to speak to us in February. She's been a regular visitor to our webinars, and she's going to be talking about the recent announcements that we have had on the development of the Sustainable Farming Incentive and the new Countryside Stewardship Plus arrangements. And then in March, we will be looking in detail at what schemes might be right for you in terms of countryside stewardship and Sustainable Farming Incentive. But for now, that's all from us. So come back soon.